Hey everyone, in today's tutorial we are going to be revisiting the top zippers on the Betty pouch. I'm going to be showing you a few different tricks that you can use when you're making your bags. The first thing that I'm going to show you is a different way to do your top zipper installation where we turn the zipper at the end before we sew it in. And I'm also going to be showing you a method that I use when I have bulkier fabrics. This is a vinyl exterior and a waterproof canvas interior. And because of the thickness of the material, you don't get the nice square corners when you use those bulky materials. So I am going to show you how to piece your lining so that you have less bulk at these corners. That will then give you a nicer shape to your bag when you're done. I'm also going to show you a way to top stitch your lining and still get the neat corners here at the ends. It had come up in a comment about the top stitching of the lining, and someone said that they prefer the look when the lining is top stitched down, and I know often people are concerned about the lining coming up. But when you top stitch all the way across from one side to the other, you do get your corners that just kind of get pinched down in the side seam. If you look at this one here, I've top stitched just to the end here, and it is top stitching the lining, and the corners on this one still are nice and square compared to this one where I top stitch all the way through, and you can kind of see here where it just pinches down into the side seam there, and that just doesn't give you that nice squared corner. You can see it on both ends there. It kind of curves in. I am going to be demonstrating all of those on the one zipper pouch, so let's get started. Materials that I'm using today are vinyl for my exterior, waterproof canvas for my interior, and in order to do the interior so that it doesn't cause too much bulk in the corners, I also have some smaller cuts of cotton woven canvas. You can also use cotton woven that has been interfaced. And then you will also need your zipper by the yard. I am using 9 inches to demonstrate today. One zipper pull. You will also need your pattern. You can use the Betty zipper patch pattern or any other pattern that you have. You can adapt these techniques to. Quick disclaimer, this is my own pattern, and that is why I am not concerned about having the pattern piece in the video. If it were another designer's pattern, I would not have the whole pattern piece shown in the video. You will need your rotary cutter, a ruler, regular scissors, pinking shears, super helpful if you have them, a regular pen, disappearing ink pen, lighter or thread zapper. You will need a needle and thread, double-sided tape, scissors, pliers, seam roller, and a point turner. Obviously, if you don't have all of these things, you can make it work with what you have. This is what I will be using today. Seems like a lot of stuff for a little pouch, but we'll just go with it. The first thing I'm going to do today is get my lining piece ready. The normal lining piece for the Betty zipper pouch is 8.5 inches at its widest point and 5 inches at its tallest point. But what we are going to be doing today is piecing our lining. So as you can see here, this is a pouch I've turned inside out. I have here waterproof canvas on the bottom and then cotton woven here at the top section. And the reason for that is that when you then turn this out, you can see there that you still have fairly nice corners. Now this is not turned out as nicely because I didn't poke it through the hole there because I turned it back out the right way. But you can see there that you've got square corners here on your pouch. Now if this was a vinyl exterior, there would still be a little more bulk there, and that is what I'm going to demonstrate today. But compared to if we just had waterproof canvas all the way up to the top of our lining piece, there is a lot less bulk because at the corner here, you just have your 2 layers of your cotton woven and your 2 layers of interfacing. So that is how we're going to do our lining today. To start off, I'm going to cut my bottom part of my lining. I'm going to be cutting that at 8.5 inches wide and 4 1/4 inches tall. Now I'm going to take my cotton canvas. You want your cotton canvas to be at a minimum 8.5 inches wide and a minimum of 1.5 inches tall. I tend to cut my pieces bigger, sew them on, and then trim it all down to the right size so that I don't end up with a lining piece that is too short. So that is what I have done here. This piece is 2.5 by 9, so that will be bigger than I need it to be, and then I'll trim it down. What I'm going to do is just lay that down here And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch along this edge. Then I can fold it up and top stitch before we cut our lining piece. You could use double-sided tape if you wanted to secure this down. Or you can use clips, and you can even just leave it as it is and just hold it together. And just make sure when you're sewing that you're keeping those edges lined up. So sewing straight down this edge using 1/4 inch seam allowance or thereabouts. And the same on the other piece. You can backstitch, but there's really not a lot of point because we're going to cut it. Now we just need to fold those seams open, and we're just going to top stitch down here on the cotton woven section. You can, if you want to, open that seam out like this and then top stitch on either side to try to reduce some bulk in your side seam. I just fold it to one side, and because it's just the cotton canvas here, or if you're using cotton woven, it doesn't create too much bulk. Now I am going to cut my linings from these pieces that we just made. I'm going to use the bottom of this as the bottom of my lining piece. And if you are concerned about your top stitching here coming undone, you can just put a little bit of fray check on the back here. I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to cut out our exterior. I have not interfaced this with anything and I won't be putting any fleece on it. I'm just going to leave the vinyl as it is. You may put stabilizer on your vinyl if you like. I find fleece doesn't adhere very well to vinyl. You can use Decaville Light. I feel like that would be a little too sturdy for what I'm after with this pouch, so I'm just going to use it as is. This is custom vinyl, so it's quite thick. Something else that I thought that I may demonstrate today for you is sewing your curve without actually cutting the curve into the exterior. If you can just cut a rectangle, then that saves you a little bit of time when you're actually constructing your bag. And if you're someone that likes to sew a lot of things, if you're sewing to sell, or if you have a lot of people you need to make gifts for, then anything you can do to save time is great. So what you can do is, rather than cut your corner, you can just put your template on and just draw that line right now, and then when you're sewing, you sew around your curve and then you just cut this corner with your pinking shears. We go back and cut them with our pinking shears anyway, so we can save ourselves a little bit of time by doing it this way. So we have our two exteriors, our two interiors, and we just need to cut a zipper end tab. So I'm going to cut this just 1 inch by 1 1/4 inches, just using up the scrap. I often cut my zipper tabs a little wider than that, but for the purposes of just using what I already have here, it's 1 inch by about 1 1/4. I'm just going to straighten up both sides, and that will be my end tab. Something else I will say about non-custom vinyl being a little bit thinner, if you find that your vinyl that you're using is still too thick, you can do this on the exterior as well, so that you would have a color block strip on the inside of your bag, and you could have a color block strip of a slightly thinner vinyl on the outside of your bag, so that you have less bulk in your corner. If you are going to do that, I suggest when you turn this one down, you go the opposite direction to what you did for your lining piece. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of bulk in that one corner where all those seams meet up. Now we're going to get our zipper ready. The first thing I'm going to do is just melt the ends here so that they don't fray while I am getting my pull on. Then I'm going to grab my pull and I'm just going to have a look at the end of my zipper tape here, and I can see that the right side here is further out, so this is the side I'm going to start putting my pull on from. I'm going to open it out about 2.5 inches, grab my pull, slide it on, then pinching the zipper tape between my thumb and forefinger to pull those zipper teeth to the side here. I'm going to take my left side and slide it up from the bottom. And then when I feel them touching, I'm just going to slide down the right side until they click together. And then I just push that zipper head on with my index finger. There we go, got it. Sometimes they stick a little. We got it there. So now that pull is on. What we're now going to do is turn out our zipper ends. In the other video of the Betty Pouch, I used the Butler method by Amy Butler. Today, I'm going to be doing a different method, and that is where you turn your zipper tape 90 degrees, and then you sew it and tack it into place. You'll need your needle and thread, and then we are just going to fold this to the side. The way that I do it is I just take my tape and about 3/4 of an inch, maybe less, maybe 1/2 inch, I just fold the tape in half and crease it on both sides at the same time so that they will be even. Then I open out my zipper tape. Seeing where that crease is, I fold it in half again. So you can see it's folded there. Then pinching that between my thumb and forefinger, I fold this end part of the tape out, and that creates a 45-degree fold in the tape there, and a 90-degree fold on the front. Hold that in place. I'm just going to grab a clip to keep that there while we match the other side. Then, using this crease that you can just ever so faintly see here, I'm going to fold that again, pinching the sides directly together, and then folding this very end of the tape out to meet this corner here to create a 45-degree fold on the back. You can see that there. And that 90-degree fold on the front. And I'm going to clip that again. Then I check to make sure that it's lined up. You can see here, this one is a lot straighter across than this one. So now we want to even them up. So to do that, you just need to slide your fold down a little, just at the back, keeping the crease at the front at the same spot. But you just kind of have to move this back fold down, and that will pull it to a straighter angle there. And pop that clip back in. So those two sides are quite even. You can keep wiggling that around until you get it exactly where you want it. But what I'm now going to do is just tack those zippers in that fold. I have a knot in the end of my thread here. I like to use a thread color that is similar to the zipper tape color. And then we're just going to sew that down to keep that curve in place. I start in the middle. This will be hidden in the seam allowance, so it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be effective. And I just whip around the edge here. Just tacking that in place. And sometimes if I'm feeling extra fancy, I thread my needle into the curve here, into the fold there rather. And then I poke it back out here in the middle. And then I just put one more stitch straight down here, just to keep that fold nice and snug up to the zipper teeth. And then I'll put it back through here. Oops, it got tangled. And then I will tie it off. And then I will repeat on the other side. So here we have our zipper tape where we've got our turns at the end so that our zipper cannot come off. What we need to do is measure it to make sure it is the correct size. So grab your exterior piece. And I use my cutting mat as a guide, but you can also use a ruler. I like to have my zipper teeth here, this inside edge of my zipper teeth, sit at 3/4 of an inch. So just lay that down there at 3/4 of an inch here, and then measuring along. And I like to have my zipper tab 5/8 of an inch in from the edge. So allowing for that little bit of thickness from the vinyl tab itself, I'm going to measure in 5/8 from the edge of my exterior is here. And then I'm just going to cut my tape here just ahead of that. Before you cut your tape and put your tab on, make sure your zipper head is on. I'm going to cut that real quick. Now I'm going to put the vinyl tab over the end, making sure that when it's folded, my stitches are going to catch both the upper and the lower layer. You can use double-sided tape to keep that in place. I'm just going to put a clip on the end. I'm going to head over to the machine and I'm going to sew this tab on. Starting in the side seam here, I'm going to back stitch. I'm using vinyl, so I'm using a slightly longer stitch length than I would use if I was doing cotton woven. I'm just going to sew straight down this edge at 1/8 of an inch. Turn 90 degrees and back stitch in the side seam there. We are now ready to sew our bag together. You will need your 2 exteriors, your 2 lining pieces, your zipper that you just prepared, and some double-sided tape. We are going to put double-sided tape along the entire top of all 4 pieces here. Just making sure if you marked your curve that you're actually putting it on the top if you have a non-directional print and you can't tell from the front. We're now going to pair these up. If you have identical linings and exteriors, then it doesn't matter which way you do this. I like to keep my tag on the back of the bag, so this will be my back interior piece. So I'm going to pop that aside and one of my exteriors aside, but my exteriors are identical. And now I'm going to peel the backing off the double-sided tape on the first exterior piece. That will be the front of the bag. Using my cutting mat as a guide, or you can use a ruler, I'm going to line up my zipper tab with 5/8 of an inch from the edge. So this outermost edge of my zipper tape will be at 5/8 of an inch from the edge of my pouch. And then I'm just going to press that down all the way to the edge. Now I can check that, and that looks like it's a little long. So just going to move it a little bit more this way so that I have a bit more space at this end. You want to have a fairly equal gap from the edge to the zipper teeth and the edge to the zipper tab. You would like those to be as close to even as you can. Slide your pull if you need to so that you can get that tape pushed down nicely without any bumps. And you can see there, it's just a little further in than 5/8, but greater than 1/2 inch on both ends. Now take your lining piece And you're just going to put that directly down on top, lining up the top edge with the top edge of the exterior and the edge of the zipper tape. And just pressing it down around the bulk of that zipper. We're now going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew straight across this edge at 1/4 of an inch. I have switched over to my zipper foot and I'm using a shorter stitch length than my top stitching length, but slightly longer than my cotton woven construction stitch length. I'm going to flip this the other way. I'm going to sew from the tab end down to the front, so vinyl side up for the front of the bag. I'm just going to back stitch, and because it's a little bulkier, just take it slowly, and I have my hump jumper nearby if I need it. Feeling for where that zipper head is, raise the presser foot and slide it back out of the way so that you have a nice straight zipper installation. Now coming up to where those teeth are folded over, taking it nice and slowly. You can back stitch over those zipper teeth if you like, all the way to the end, and then back stitch again. Now we're going to fold that open and just check it. That looks good. What I am going to do, because this is vinyl and it tends to roll a little and get in the way, is just put some double-sided tape down in the seam allowance here. Press that down, peel it off, and I'm just going to fold that vinyl down and stick it onto the double-sided tape to just keep it nice and out of the way. Now we're going to do the other side. Take your other exterior piece. What you want to do here is line up the edges of your exterior down this side here and the edge of the zipper tape at the top and the other edge here. So you're lining up on 3 sides here. If I slide my zipper pull to the middle, it may be a little easier on this side, but we will have to just check that our zipper placement is good. Flip it over. Sometimes it makes it a little easier to get that tape lined up there. And then we know that we had our zipper teeth here just outside of 1/2 inch on the other side. So we can see that that is pretty much the same there. Line that up. If you have your zipper tape right up in line with the exterior here, that is going to give you a smooth zipper on your bag. You want to make sure that there's no bumps in your zipper, there's no waves in your zipper. You want it to be smooth and flat and exactly against the edge, and that's going to give you that beautiful zipper on the top of your bag. Grab your other lining piece and you're just going to sandwich that between the two. Zipper teeth always face down onto your exterior, and you're doing right sides together. When we get over to the machine, we're going to be sewing from the tab end again. Just press that lining around those zipper teeth there. We're going to be sewing along this edge again. Get all those lines nice and smooth. Then the same as the other side, sewing at 1/4 of an inch, back stitching, but this time we're sewing lining side up. When you get to your zipper pull, raise your presser foot, just slide it back out of the way, lower it again, and we're just continuing all the way down to this end. Careful over the teeth, back stitch, and then back stitch again at the end. I'm going to grab that double-sided tape again, just fold that vinyl down on this side. At this point, before I top stitch, I just like to check that I'm happy with my zipper. So I want to see that my edges here are close to being even. I want to see that either side of my zipper tape is smooth and as evenly spaced as it can be. And I want to see that the two turns in my zipper are lining up. So that looks reasonably good. Now we're going to top stitch. For this particular patch today, I am going to be top stitching the lining. So before I do that, I want to just make sure that it is pulled down and pressed down. So I will take my seam roller and I'm just going to press that seam there. Pulling it open and then pressing it down so that it's nice and flat and even. When we top stitch, we're going to be top stitching from just outside the zipper tab to just outside the zipper teeth, leaving about 1/2 inch on the edge where it is not top stitched. And you're going to want to make sure you're pulling your lining tight when you're doing it so that you don't sew the lining with it do your top stitching where the lining is rolling out a little. So we're going to sew from here to here. You can do it without back stitching and leave long tails, which we will then pull through and tie, or you can do a couple of back stitches. It is up to you. It depends on your feelings about having the back stitching visible on the outside of your bag. Before top stitching, especially on vinyl, I like to make sure that I have enough thread in my bobbin so that I don't run out in the middle of top stitching. And make sure that I've got the correct thread color that I want loaded up. And I'm just going to start just before this zipper tab here. And I'm using a longer stitch length for my top stitching because it's vinyl. And making sure also that I have long tails here because I'm going to tie those off rather than back stitch here. And I'm going to just hold those to make sure I don't get any nesting. Hand crank the first couple of stitches and then sewing all the layers here. I'm going to sew down here and I'm going to stop just past those zipper teeth. Pause to move my zipper pull. Taking it nice and slowly and then stop just past those zipper teeth. Take a nice long tail there, cut it off, and then we're going to do the same thing on this side, pulling that lining if you need to make sure it's not curling around at the edge. So just pulling that nice and taut. And starting just before the teeth, you can use this side to make sure that you're starting in the same spot. Long tail, hold the threads, hand crank 1, 2, and then I'm going to continue down this side of the zipper. Raise the presser foot, slide my pull, and then continue along. Stopping just past that tab, raise the needle, raise the presser foot, pull a nice long tail. We have here our 4 ends that we need to finish up. So I turn this over and I'm going to pull the thread through to the interior, and then I'm going to tie a knot and then tuck it back inside my lining. All that top stitching is done there now. I've tucked those threads through and knotted and then tucked them into the lining. Some people like to sew across the end of this zipper tab as well as another option. You could start here, go up, across the tab and back down, and then you only have to tie off the 2 threads at the end. Now that that is done, the next thing for us to do is to sew up our side seams. You will need your clips or pins if you prefer pins and a stapler. Open your zipper about halfway and then fold the bag so that the exterior sides are together. Starting with this side seam here, making sure that they are lined up here at the fold, I'm going to put a clip on, flip it over, and put a clip on the other side too, making sure these folds again are lined up. And then keeping the edges of your pouch lined up, we're going to clip all the way around the exterior. I'm now going to do the same for the lining piece, just pulling it away at this corner there. I'm lining up this seam here also. As you can see here, this is where that lining has been partially top stitched, so it doesn't pull away as neatly. You can see that there's just a little bubble there, but when we sew, we'll be able to pull that tight and still get a nice seam around our lining. Leaving a little gap for turning, grab a pen and then just mark 4 inches in the center there. And then we're going to put some more clips to hold that lining together. Then with those clips in place, we're going to come back to this side seam and I'm just going to pull it open, pull it taut there. And then I'm going to hold the lining here on the zipper. And I'm going to put a staple here where this clip was to hold the edge of the exterior together. Check that that's lined up. If you need to, you can wiggle it a little bit with the staple in, but that one looks good. Same on the other side. Pulling that lining tight and out of the way. Holding here at the zipper, a little further back. This is about 1/2 inch back so that you don't pinch your fingers, but putting a fair bit of pressure just to hold those edges together. And pop the staple in within the seam allowance. Make sure the prongs are folded down and that you're happy with the positioning. We're now ready to go and sew our exterior seams and our lining seam. When I'm sewing, I'm going to be starting from this side of the opening and going all the way around the exterior using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because my lining piece was cut smaller than my exterior, I can use the same seam allowance the whole way around without needing to increase it to make the lining fit snugly. So I'll go all the way around. When I get to this point here, I will pull on the lining to make that part straight to let us get past this bump here. Because this is folded, we need to pull it straight so that our lining doesn't bunch up in this side seam and we'll still get that nice corner on the way around. So that's an important part to make sure that your corners sit out nicely. If you remember, I showed you here, this is where it's caught in. But if we make sure we pull that seam, then it won't be tucked like that. We'll be able to get all the way around so that you end up with the more square corner there. We'll continue all the way around here, 1/4 inch, and then when we get to the curve, we're going to sew on the line we've drawn. Sew along the bottom here to have a nice straight base around the other curve, and then continue along this side. Again, when we come here, pulling that lining so that we can get around this tab end, continue all the way to here. When I start and stop, I will actually start and stop further out from the marks. So when I commence sewing, I will start here and I will back stitch up to this line, and then I will stitch further around here so that I don't have loose threads at my opening that I then have to fold and close. Let's head to the machine. I am using a seam allowance of 1/4 of an inch, and I am using my zipper foot to do this so that when I get to this corner here where it's a little tricky and a little bulky, it'll be easier to get past the end of the zipper and the zipper tab. And I can also use the width of my zipper foot to help me keep a nice consistent seam allowance as I sew around the bag. So starting about 1/2 inch further up from the mark that I've made, I'm going to back stitch to the mark, and then I'm going to sew forwards. You can use your curve template for the lining piece as well. I tend to just use my zipper foot to get around the curve. As it's tucked inside the bag, I'm not as particular about having it perfectly symmetrical. I find that using my zipper foot is sufficient to get a reasonable curve there. Coming up to this first bump where we've pieced our lining, and then you can see the fold here where it wants to stay tucked because we've sewn this lining down with the top stitching. And if we had sewn all the way to the end, it would be folded here also, and we would just sew over it. And that is the reason that those corners tuck in on the sides of those pouches. Because we've stopped our top stitching here, I can pull on that and get a straight edge that will let me sew past that, and that will help us with our corners. So just holding the bag here and at the front, I'm going to go nice and slowly. Use a hump jumper if you need it, and then I'm just going to put a bit of pressure as I need to keep my zipper foot lined up with the edge. I have to curve the bag to get around that corner there. But I'm still sewing straight in line with the edge there. Now I'm going to turn and pull it out of the way from the back. I'm just going to back stitch here, make sure that I'm sewing straight down the side. Watch out for your staple there. Keep an eye on those prongs in the feed dogs. Always check that they're folded in nicely and give them a squeeze with my pliers if I need to. Continuing around at 1/4 of an inch and then sewing on the line that we drew earlier for our corner curve, coming around to the bottom seam, and we will sew straight across the second curve, coming around 1/4 of an inch back up the other side, holding that in place, slowing down as we get to this next corner and just pulling that lining over here. I can just hold it in place with my thumb there, taking it nice and slowly, reinforce here, taking it slowly, and I may need to just hand crank it just to get it around that bulk there. I'm going to turn it, and then I'm just going to pull that lining tight, and I'm just going to do a couple of little hand cranks here. Move that pull out, sorry, that clip out of the way. There's still a bit of bulk there from the joint in the lining. Going straight down. Just going to go back there. It's just not as straight as I would like. Correct that. Sewing up to that mark. Back stitch. And then this is where I will finish my seam. Take a quick look at your seam and make sure that you're happy with it, especially at these corners here. You don't want to have any skip stitches there when you've come around that curve. Remove your staples. And now using your pinking shears or just your regular scissors to make little triangles, we're just going to trim these curves, being careful not to cut any of the stitches. And then on this corner, we're cutting that whole bit off there that we didn't cut into the curve shape earlier. What we're now going to do is fold up this bottom seam here so that we can turn the bag and then we can close the lining. Before I turn the bag, I just like to open up this side seam and give it a bit of a press here to help it open up once we turn the bag through. And then we are ready to turn it out. This being vinyl and waterproof canvas, it may be a little trickier to turn than when we did the cotton woven version. If you need to, you can use some heat from your hairdryer just to soften the vinyl and the waterproof canvas, and that will help you turn it through this opening here. If you have a point turner, I'm going to use the rounded end just on these bottom curves here to encourage those to just turn out. Finger press them a little. And I'm just going to push it along that bottom seam. And now we're going to push out this tabbed corner here. That is the hardest part to push out. To do that, I like to expose the seam from the inside and then supporting it with my finger or my thumb, I'm just going to pop it out. And just pushing my thumb into it from the back. And then I can take my point turner and just help those seams to really pop out there. Make sure that they're lined up well. And on the other end, you can see here where that top stitching ends, and it kind of wants to bunch up, but once we tuck it in, it'll be going the right way. These bottom curves don't need to be pushed out all the way, but they do need to be pushed out a little so that we can close up that lining. Check that you are happy with your corners and with the way that those seams are lining up there. It is easier to see if your corners are correct before the lining is tucked in and also before you close it up. So I am happy with that. I'm going to go and close this lining hole up, and then we can tuck the lining in to have a final look at how the pouch turned out using the vinyl and the waterproof canvas. Taking a look here to see where my seam ends, I'm going to make sure that I start just outside of that. You can mark that too to make sure that you are getting a long enough seam to enclose that opening. Keeping my threads tight, I'm going to be sewing at about 1/8 of an inch, maybe slightly less. And then just sewing straight along this edge here. Making sure to go about 1/2 inch past the opening on the other end also. You can melt or tuck in your threads. Then we can tuck our lining in. You can see the corner here is pretty good. It's not, you know, as perfect as it is when you use the thinner fabric like the cotton woven, but for vinyl, it's a reasonably good corner. Same with this end. There is obviously a little bit more bulk there because it's got the waterproof canvas on the inside. With vinyl too, compared to cotton woven, you will get a little bit more rolling here, which will contribute to it looking as though you have a bowed base of your bag there. What I like to do is put some weight on that. I usually use my cold heat press to just put some weight on those seams, and that will help that to roll out there. And then once that's flattened, you'll see that you have a straight bottom there. And there we have it. If there's anything else that you want to have me cover in a future video, please don't hesitate to let me know. But hopefully what we've covered today is helpful and you can take some of that information into your future bag making endeavors. Thanks everyone.